Welcome to Organized Voices. This is episode 9. We're having Victor Valerio, who is running for school board in Oakland Unified School District. I want to note that today is August 23rd, Sunday of 2020. We are in the midst of a massive California wildfire crisis right now. So my heart goes out to all those that are fighting those fires in the front lines. Thank you for all your service. Thank you to all the essential workers that are helping us deal with this crisis, and for all those who are donating and helping out. I also wanted to note that it's Kobe Bryant's birthday, the first of his birthdays since his tragic death earlier this year. So condolences to his family. And thank you, Kobe, for teaching us about your work ethic. We are still mourning your death, but also celebrating your life. So, and then of course it's Virgo season. So happy birthday to all the Virgos who are in our audience. And I just wanted to quickly shout out She Movement Radio, where we can also be heard on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Pandora, and of course on our website, organizedvoices.media. We're having Victor Valerio, like I said, once again as our guest. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
Sure. So I just want to point out, Victor is running for school board in Oakland. Which precinct is that?
District 7.
District 7. He'll be on the ballot for November, which is in about 2 months from now. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Victor.
Well, I was born and raised in Oakland. I'm a former student from the Oakland Public Schools. Currently, I'm a committee member for the Citizen Oversight Bond Committee for AB, Transportation Project Engineer for SMTA in San Francisco, which is a municipal transportation agency.
I'm sorry, it kind of like your internet cut out right when you were explaining who you were.
Okay, again, I was born and raised in Oakland. I'm currently a committee member for the Citizens Oversight Bond Committee for the Oakland Unified School Districts for bonds A, B, and J. And I am a transportation project engineer for SFMTA, which is a municipal transportation agency in San Francisco.
Okay, and what drew you to the school board?
Well, what drew me to the school board is for multiple reasons. One has been the loss of trust between the community and the school board recently due to budget crisis, mismanagements, and misallocations of funds, in addition to school closures that have occurred in the last 8 years. And again, being a former student, I believe in strengthening neighborhood schools. And this was the first time in a long time where 4 seats are up for grabs this coming election in November. Yeah, I believe that whoever gets elected in this year will determine the outcome and the policy for the school board in the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I just want to point to the audience, if it's not obvious already, this election has a lot of stakes on the line. And it starts not just in the presidential election, but here in your local elections. And so I really want to press upon our audience the importance of knowing what's going on in your local politics so that you're apprised of your candidates running and knowing how they're planning on fixing the problems that affect our kids specifically and directly. Tell us a little bit about what you've observed in the school system, other than the politics and the board, just in terms of how the students are coping with COVID and quarantine lockdown.
Well, currently right now in Oakland, we are seeing things that were exposed, which a lot of us already knew are the inequities that exist within the community of Oakland. The 20% of our students do not have access to computers or internet. With the fact that we're doing online learning now, which are having students attend schools this school year, 2020 to 2021, we realize 20 of them are not attending classes online for the same reason, because they don't have access.
How much? How many of them?
20% of our students.
20% of students
20%,
within
yeah,
Oakland or
within
overall?
Oakland, within Oakland. And it might be more, considering that a lot of students are, mainly Black and brown students who don't have access to the internet or a computer, and especially those who are special needs students may have difficulty learning online. And so that's one thing that we're confronting right now as a reality, that there is inequities that we knew about, but it's being exposed now because of the pandemic. And we know that in itself are setting a lot of our students back under learning.
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. How are we tracking attendance by the students?
Currently right now, every teacher is assigned a certain number of students enrolled in their class, and the teachers are required to take attendance of those participating online through, the platform we're currently using, like Zoom or Skype or whichever the school district may be using at the moment. And if they expect 30 students to sign in, they might be getting 25 or 20 students only participating on a daily basis, meaning that there's 10 students who are in truancy who have not been attending class online.
How does that differ from when they were not in quarantine? Is that number higher or lower than before quarantine?
It will definitely be higher during quarantine, because even then we knew that they were presently there. Even if they lacked the technology to be online, we knew they had the facility to be from home to be attending school at the school site.
That is really alarming.
It is definitely concerning
Yeah.
for those who are in the neighborhood, and concerning more so, between Black and brown students or special needs students who've already had difficulty. Those who have been at risk and marginalized in recent years, they already had the obstacles to overcome, and with with the pandemic and the lack of resources, it makes it even more difficult for them to attend classes. More so for them to catch up, if that's something that we're looking forward in the next year or so.
So wow, that's really crazy. I just want to say that I am working with a group of amazing advocates for education who are really working hard to develop a program that is an alternative to the current public school system because of the dangers of COVID. Shout outs to Marcus Forbes, who is a young man who has graduated from Harvard Kennedy School of Business, I believe, and is creating a program for athletes, but has a component with it that adds a homeschooling component. And it's designed for athletes to have kind of a supplemental tutoring service, but we're trying to expand on that to give alternatives to the school option so that parents can have an alternative for their kids to have some sort of education available from the home. What are your thoughts on a move like that in light of COVID, Victor?
I believe it might be it's a slippery slope in the sense, because we already have a history of a school district we built up in the last 100 years. And yes, we definitely should be looking into different platforms currently right now because of the pandemic. How can we better serve students from home in the time being, while at the same time building up a comprehensive plan for safety and health if we were to open up schools again? We don't want to privatize learning in the process. It's something because in the last 100 years, we built up a school district that supplies a safety net for everybody to attend and have an education being accessible to them. Again, I'm open to, as a former student from Oakland, and it can't, even though we're going online as a platform, it can never be the engagement and physical presence in the classroom can never be replaced. And currently,
I want to stop you there to ask you a little bit more about what you just said.
Okay.
Now, I just want to clarify to the audience, I am a proponent and believer of public school education. I think that there are some pros and cons to charter schools, private schools, and of course, online or not homeschool learning. However, I think that times are changing now, and we're also dealing with an entire social justice / civil rights movement pointing out that institutions have taught kids, our students, to normalize racism and to normalize hiding or omitting certain truths from our history books. And so what are your thoughts on that, Victor?
Well, recently we've been having, in Oakland particularly, we've actually been trying to change the curriculum and how history is being taught to our students. I'm a proponent of inclusivity. I'm a proponent for recognizing the diversity that has been in the United States. It's nothing new. It's something that's always been existing. We are a country built on immigrants and a country built on diverse groups of people, which have worked hard to make democracy, representation thrive.
Let me ask you a more specific question. what are the challenges to changing the curriculum so that it's accurately depicting the U.S. history and addressing the lack of diversity in the lessons that are taught in our institutions? What are the challenges to doing that, and how can we overcome them?
Well, in Oakland, we've had that challenge in years before, but this is the first actually the school board has adopted to include ethnic studies in our curriculum as a requirement for high school and junior high. And the first time in a long time, we are including history of all backgrounds to be included in the curriculum, whether it be African American history, Latino history, Asian American history, as part of the curriculum to introduce a more broader and a more inclusive history for our students to learn about our background as a country. So as in our end is the implementation for us. We've already passed a policy within the school board to introduce that as being part of curriculum. Now is the implementation. How is that history going to be formed to be taught to the students? And those are the next steps we have. Now, Oakland being a unique as diverse city and community in California, we've done our efforts in trying to introduce that. In other states, I can imagine it be still being a lingering dialogue that's needed within its community.
So is it true? Is it correct? Is it correct that the school board is the one who passes that kind of curriculum change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Locally, the school board passes policy on how the students are going to be taught. The state places a template. What's the requirements of objectives the students need to learn? And in the local school board, it's their job to determine how they're going to go about it and implement those objectives the state puts forward.
Okay.
Locally, we've included ethnic studies in our curriculum. The state could also take this level of also introducing that and make that a requirement statewide for all school districts to adopt as well. But locally here in Oakland, we made that a reality.
Okay, so you're saying that that kind of change is already happening in Oakland, that kind of curriculum change and inclusion and diversity is already happening there.
Oakland.
Okay, well that's great news.
In the last 3 months, we've defunded the police force that was part of our Oakland school district not too long ago, a month ago. And at the same time, we also passed a policy to include ethnic studies within our curriculum starting in the next couple of years.
Ethnic studies?
Ethnic studies.
That's amazing. Okay, so those are some excellent highlights that I think should be pointed out to our audience, and then of course to the rest of the nation, that in places like Oakland Unified School District, we are implementing changes to the curriculum and including ethnic studies and diversity and re-evaluating the curriculum that is taught in our schools to our students K through 12. Okay, so to restructure the question from earlier, what are some remaining challenges in order to making sure that all of our students are getting an education that isn't like the old model, where they're having an opportunity to have advancement or curriculum that's designed for each student and not so standardized? What are your thoughts on standardized education?
I think we emphasize too much of standardized education when we should be focusing more on teaching rigorous curriculum across the board to all students, but putting in the student support in place for them to have the opportunity to really grasp the subject they're learning. Standardized testing only tests people who have the resources, but we realize today that not all the students have the same.
I think standardized testing also only tests those that can take tests. Now, I have to admit, I was one of those students where I could take tests really well, K through 12. But when I was in law school, I was not a good test taker for other reasons. I think that it's the type of test and how the tests are written that really impacts how the students do, and that's why I don't think that it's a fair way of gauging or determining a student's life forever and ever.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
What do you think about that?
No, you're absolutely right. A standardized test does not really engage the student or have an assessment of the student's learning because it's meant to, well, as we know, we live in a society which there is inequities and not everyone has the same resources. A lot of students who are coming from more affluent areas have more resources available to them to become better test takers. While in areas where more low income, marginalized communities have been impacted by a long history of racism, a long history of
Yeah, it's not even so much about
negligence.
racism as so much as it's about structural oppression. Just so that for our audience, I just want to interject that I teach introduction to social justice studies at American River College, and a model that I think works, that I've observed works well with the students, is to really tailor assignments and exams to the abilities that they already possess. So, for example, for some of their reading assignments, if they prefer to annotate the articles that they've read in video form because they're better speakers than they are writers, that's okay. And I allow them to submit their feedback and analysis via video instead of as paper. Or if they prefer to express what they feel or learn or have analyzed through art form or a song, or, you know, there are artists and then there are writers and then there are, people who can speak. There are just different tactical ways in which a person learns, and you want to provide those opportunities. Is that too revolutionary for a school in Oakland?
Not necessarily. I think, if anything, as you mentioned before, every student has a specialized skill that they are unique for. Some are more visual, so others are more verbal, others tend to be more legible in which they learn. And revolutionary in which curriculum can be accommodating more toward a student may be true. I think it's in our responsibility that a student learns the broad subjects of all. Meaning, if you may be good visually, you may be good in verbally, as you mentioned, whether it be you're a good writer or you're a good speaker. Yes, we definitely could exercise that and give them and accommodate them the opportunity for them to excel and show how they can improve in their skill they're good at. But at the same time, we don't want to miss the opportunity to also show them how we can make them better writers, how we can make them better speakers, or how we can make them better readers in the process. It's revolutionary in which I think could touch all subjects, and they may be good, like as I mentioned before, they may excel in one or another.
Yeah, I'm not in no means suggesting that students skip out on basic core classes. I think everyone should still take an art class and a writing class and a science class and a math class, even if you don't like math. But I think that the way in which we gauge their progress, the way in which we gauge their achievement, because at the end of the day, I think that if we are too heavy-handed in enforcing certain rules, we're risking being an oppressor in a student's life at such a young age that it sets their entire trajectory for their entire life. And I don't know if enough educators and school board members and people that are trying to get involved in it, like yourself, are fully aware of just how severe the impact can be in matters of disciplining students, in matters of grading students, and in matters of gauging their overall success in schools.
No,
And
I mean,
what can we do to making sure that we give every student a fair opportunity that isn't oppressive, is my question.
okay. Ultimately, well, no, it's a heavy question,
sorry,
but nonetheless, it's
putting pressure
a
on
fair
you.
question to ask. No, not at all. Not at all.
Anyone running for school board, and I'm gonna ask this to any educator or any school board member. So,
No,
fair treatment.
it's a fair question. I mean, no.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a fair question, and I respect that question because it's true. I mean, the thing is, everybody has a different way of learning.
Yeah.
And it's fine. We cannot, learning is not a cookie cutter approach for anyone. When I was learning, I'm more of a doer than a reader, but I like reading because I like to get the information from it. But when it comes down to the line of like, how do I better learn a subject, is by doing it. There are others who are going to learn it by reading it. And there's others who are more visual. Just by looking at somebody else doing it, they learn it. And so, yeah, that's the reality. Not everybody's the same. And we cannot measure all the students with the same ruler. The one thing we do want to measure is if they grasp the subject, do they understand what they're learning. And the best way to approach it will be, and I agree with you in that sense, is like, how can they tell us, how can they communicate to us that they understood the subject they were learning? Can they
Right.
do it by, can they do it by writing? Can they do it by visual? Can they do it by speaking? And yes, as long as they're able to communicate that they grasped the subject and they mastered it, then yes, we've done our job.
Right. Obviously, you know, you can't express what you learned in a rap song for a math class, like, you
Of
know, you
course.
have to show your work and all that.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about, you know, more in classes like electives or literature or, you know, and of course there are basic foundation, like we should all learn how to write a complete sentence, know
Yeah.
where commas go and all that, like grammar and things like that are important. But
There's certain fundamental things we want to make sure they understand.
of course,
This,
we definitely want all of our students to come out of school as, you know, having a fair set of skills
yeah.
that are necessary to succeed in life. So of course,
So here's the thing. Now the question is like, one thing is what they're learning fundamentally that we want to make sure. We want to make sure that if you're in ninth grade, you're reading on ninth grade level or 10th. If you're learning math, we want to make sure you know the basic fundamentals of arithmetic, algebra, trigonometry, and geometry by the time you graduate.
yeah,
When the time you graduate from high school, we want to make sure you understand chemistry. We want to make sure you understand physics. We want to make sure you understand biology or, you know, social sciences, because these are things that you will encounter in the real world the moment you step out of high school. And the thing is, what we ultimately want to make sure that they grasp these subjects, if they know it by heart, and they are comfortable to understanding how the dynamics are outside the classroom and how they are implemented in their everyday life. That's what we shoot for. But then also on top of that is how do we implement it in their daily lives? And that's when it comes down to like, how are we preparing our students to have a pathway after high school and not wait till college for them to determine what they want to do. 40 years ago, the moment they graduated from high school, most students were able to get a job in whichever direction they wanted to get one, because there were pathways set up for them to follow after they graduated from high school. Today, we have to wait till they go to college, and we encourage them to go to college in order to find that pathway. And I think we're actually delaying them the opportunity for them to succeed and to thrive.
my problem is I don't think I learned critical thinking skills until college, which I think is way too late.
It is. I think so too.
I think critical thinking skills should be taught like first grade. Question what you're being taught.
Yeah.
And know the difference between credible and non-credible sources. I mean, first grade is a little early, I guess. You're like, who created
it's a critical age, I think, and that's when most students start to really question things. And you know this by experience. I remember this by experience. Most of the time, most students start to rebel by the time they're in junior high. And that's when you're really interested.
At what grade are we learning about hypotheses? Isn't it like third or fourth grade? We're learning about electricity and like scientific method. We're learning about asking a scientific question and then finding a way to prove or disprove the theory, right?
Yeah, by the time you're in fifth grade and sixth grade, you're already being introduced to the hypotheses.
But you see how the way that's taught is so specific to science and it's not taught to be applied to anything else in life. Which is why students are taught thinking that what's in the history books is absolute truth, when in fact, who wrote that history book, right?
Yeah. And again, and that comes from questioning history starts developing in high school. I remember this because when I was in high school, some teachers were teaching the standard U.S. history textbook. But I had one teacher, who was Dr. Lee, who was teaching alternative history books written by historians.
So Dr. Lee?
Yeah, for example, I had a professor.
Shout out to Dr. Lee.
Well, Dr. Lee introduced us. He was African American, and he was part Native American. And instead of teaching us in his class, it was ninth grade, the standard U.S. history, textbook, talking about the arrival of Columbus, the Industrial Revolution, and so forth. He started us teaching us from a book named "I Left My Heart in Wounded Knee," which is the history of Native American history and how the Native Americans here in the country experienced their version of U.S. history through their eyes in the last 200 years. And it gave us a twist of a history that most students didn't learn growing up. in an elementary school or in junior high. And that was by Dr. Brownlee. was,
Okay.
was the author of that book. And it was an excellent book, but it was a very vivid, real observation of American history of Native Americans. And for me, that was my first experience looking at ethnic studies through a Native American history. And for me, that's when, as a student, you started asking questions.
So hot.
You know, what's been my history? I'm looking at the Eurocentric history of, you know, the English arriving to America and then seeing how they came up through history, informing governments, informing states, informing their representation of innovation and their milestones. But what about the Latinos who were here? Or what about the Latin American, the Native Americans who were here? Or what about the African Americans when they were here? You know, the one thing that was actually mentioned in the U.S. in the standard U.S. history about Latinos has been the U.S.-Mexican War of 1846 to 1848. And when we talk about the African Americans, we mainly emphasize on the slavery that happened during the beginning of this country.
We started on that. But yeah, I'm really glad that
again, it's a broad.
I'm really glad that you had a teacher, because I didn't learn about Don Quixote and I didn't learn about the conquistadors until college. So, you know, I was like in AP history and all that. I loved history, so I couldn't stop digging, but I still was not aware of I mean, you hear about Columbus, right? The way that they teach Columbus is so watered down. Like, they didn't tell us that Columbus was a human trafficking rapist who was a gangster, drug lord, that the Spanish king and queen had, you know, set off to pay money to go and slash and kill and rape and pillage whoever he found.
Well, let's go with this. Columbus was not even Spanish. He was Italian.
Exactly.
Who went to Spain as an immigrant to get finance to go and explore if the world was round.
That's why. It wasn't to explore, it was to go and get the gold.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, it wasn't even gold because he didn't even know there was gold. His goal was trying to get to India and trying to find a quicker route for them to bring silk and spices to Spain. Along the way, he just happened to just bump into what we know America. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, there's gold. Okay.
So let's look. That's a whole separate
subject. I understand.
I just want to say shout out to Oakland School Board. We want to make sure that we get people like Victor in the position that makes the decisions on changing our curriculum, on making more inclusive and diverse our curriculum for our students. And of course, finding ways in which we can get students more engaged and not sit out 20% of y'all from, you know, attending classes online. And how can we make it more engaging, and how can we make it more fair, and how can we make sure that our students are getting the quality education that they deserve so that they can be successful contributing members, meaningful members to our society, and you know, following the schools not prisons pipeline. So I just wanted to quickly shut that out. I want to actually, before we close, Victor, ask you about elections in general. What are your thoughts on the Biden/Harris ticket, and what your projections are for this election in November? Are you fearful? Are you hopeful? Are you excited? Like, what are your...
I'm excited and I'm hopeful. What has been the U.S. history of the United States, what has been the history of the United States in the last 500 years? Yeah, I'm going to say 500 years just because we're in the millennial now. Our struggle has always been inclusivity. And this ticket right here is between the president.
Is that your
rooster? That's a rooster we have in the background. We believe in urban farming in Oakland. We have our neighbors.
Urban farms.
Have the same roosters in the background.
Go ahead.
I'm excited. Sorry about that.
As excited as your rooster?
I'm excited as the rooster.
I think your rooster's more excited.
Oh, yes. But I'm excited as well.
Okay.
We share the same excitement.
That's good.
I'm excited about the Harris-Biden ticket because it represents the diversity that exists in this country. They represent the progressive policies of trying to make this country more inclusive because we are a diverse society in which we exist as we stand. In what's been our history has always been a struggle of inclusivity, to recognize every person who's contributed to this country for its formation and its strength in its community. And I'm excited because I believe that they will implement a form of government that's correspondent to the diversity that is this country. I mean, you have Harris, who was our the state attorney for California in the last 4 years, who's now senator. And you have Biden, who has an experience, who's gone through a recession, along with President Obama, in the last beforehand when we had our last recession, and they understand the importance that it is to invest in the community during this tough time, and at the same time being responsive to the community who have faced right now the current recession because of the pandemic, and the steps that needs to be taken to weather it and overcome it in the coming years.
I appreciate that perspective. For the audience, I just want to, this is my first time publicly commenting on the Biden-Harris ticket. California is a blue state, so our votes aren't going to matter. The Electoral College will vote for Biden and Harris. So it's irrelevant what we think about it. That's what's going to happen. It's up to the swing states to determine who's going to be our next president. So if we're in a swing state and you want Trump out, Biden and Harris vote is the only way that you can make a difference. If you vote otherwise or don't vote, we might get stuck with Trump again. There's a highly likely chance that we're going to get stuck with Trump again. If that's what you want, then so be it. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. That's all I'm going to say about that for right now. But as far as the Biden-Harris ticket, I'm not going to talk about whether I'm excited or not because it doesn't matter. The Electoral College is going to make my vote. Now, what I will talk about is the work that we have to do. So if and when Biden-Harris wins, then we have a list of policies that need to change. And I would certainly hope that Biden and Harris, with their legal education and lawyer background, would understand to uphold and protect the Constitution more so than Trump can in matters of climate change, in matters of women's rights, in matters of immigration policies, and in matters of police brutality and systemic racism. So that's all I can say, is that regardless of who the leader is, a leader should serve their people. It's not how they can get the most amount of power, it's in what position can they put themselves in to be of most service to our people. And so because you're also running for office, Victor, I just thought that it would be a good reminder. And I am also in a leadership position in many capacities. So I think that it's an important reminder that leaders in this country are leading to serve. It's not so that we can be in positions of power, so that we can exercise power for our own self, right?
No, I agree. Our responsibility as a leadership, if we're given the honor of representing a community, that is our foremost responsibilities, to represent them, to collaborate with all stakeholders, to listen, to collaborate, to plan and design and mitigate issues that come up. Ultimately, at the end of the day, our boss, like if I'm an elected director for the school board, my boss is going to be everybody who lives in District 7. And my concern will be ultimately to find the best answer for them and work with them to find a solution to the problems we'll face currently and in the future. That's what it is. Simple as that. And being transparent and accountable at the same time.
I think it's also very important to press upon the point that in leadership, empathy is absolutely necessary. The ability to put yourself in other shoes. How can you be a leader and not be able to do that, right?
Right.
Empathy.
I mean, ultimately, it's not even just empathy, is having understanding.
Exactly.
And for us to understand, we got to listen. We got to talk to them. We got to be there and hear them out and see where they're coming from to understand their truth. For us to factor it in, and ultimately, in the end of the day, to see what's the best decision that would benefit everyone.
Exactly.
That's our role whether you're a school board director or whether you're a city councilman or the mayor or the governor, at the end of the day, you got to listen to everyone because that's who you represent. Even the people who didn't vote for you, you represent them. And we got to find something that will benefit everyone, considering that where they're coming from and hearing them out, how a certain decision will impact them. But in the end of the day, we want to make sure that the decision we make as their representative.
Telling us we need to wrap it up. But is that your rooster or neighbor's rooster?
That is my neighbor's.
That's your rooster?
That's my rooster, and our neighbors have a rooster as well.
Whose rooster is it right now? That's doing
the one earlier before was probably our neighbors, and the one singing right now is ours.
For the audience, this was actually our second take because of that damn rooster. And he's re-emerged to let us know that he's not having it. But I just wanted to say, I think it's a strong way to finish on the lesson of empathy and our discussion of elections, leadership, and your campaign. So congratulations again to your running.
Thank you.
I look forward to working with you on the next 2 months to help you win. But most importantly, to advocate for our students. Really, that's who we really need to educate for. And of course, parents, but I think students are the ultimate benefactors that have everything riding on this. So thank you for joining Organized Voices today. Victor, I wish you all the best, and I will speak with you shortly. But again, thank you for joining us and talking to us a little bit about your campaign. I wish you all the best.
I appreciate your invitation. I appreciate this time and share our views and share our passion and trying to make things better for our community and our students in this case.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Victor.
Thank you.